Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and good morning. I am General Harun Aslam, retired, and I welcome you on behalf of Iqbal Institute of Policy Studies for a live webinar titled Revitalizing Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises in Pakistan. The webinar will discuss and analyze the state of SMEs in Pakistan and suggest solutions for its improvement and beyond that also. A few words about Iqbal Institute, which is commonly known as IPS. It's an independent research institute with a mission to generate, track, and advocate public policies toward achievement of sustainable development in Pakistan. In addition to taking on research projects for policy advocacy, we embark upon the concept of swift research, wherein it undertakes time-bound research and compiles a series of reports for policy and decision-making. About the webinar, you are the experts from various fields. SMEs constitutes nearly 90% of all the enterprises in Pakistan. Employs 80% of non-agricultural labor force. Share in annual GDP is 40% approximately. So that shows its importance, but it's a general belief that SMEs do not get that required attention. Whatever policies have been coming forth, they lacked implementation. We'll analyze that what are the problems, what are the hindrances, what are the impediments, and suggest how to move forward. So just a few words about the conduct of webinar. Each panelist will have 12 to 15 minutes, so we can stretch it for another minute or two. And you can speak in English. We'll proceed with English, and you can always converse in Urdu as well. Switch over to Urdu whenever you feel like. A brief introduction of our panelist. Mr. Zafar Masood is currently the President and CEO of Bank of Punjab. He has previously served in executive positions for several multinational banks in Pakistan and abroad. He will speak on the role of banking sector in supporting SMEs. We have Dr. Shujaat Ali. He is a member of IPS Advisory Board. He'll speak on how can federal and provincial government support growth in SMEs. He is a retired civil servant and has held many important appointments, including Special Secretary Finance. Mr. Almas Haider, he's Chairman of Synthetic Products Enterprises. He'll speak on the role of SMEs in revitalizing economic growth in Pakistan. He's an entrepreneur and trainer affiliated with the government boards of education, training, development, and policy making institutes like SMEDA. Dr. Zubair Ghori, no webinar is without representation from academia. He's Pro-Rector Research in Namal University. He'll speak on role of business incubation centers in industry-academia linkage. Dr. Zubair is Pro-Rector in Namal University, is an ex-member of Planning Commission of Pakistan. Dr. Khakan Hassan Najib has joined us from Paris. He'll speak on minimum reform agenda for SME sector in Pakistan. Dr. Khakan Hassan is a senior economist and a public policy expert. He has served as an advisor to the Ministry of Finance. So without much explanations further, I'll request Mr. Almas Haider to please give his presentation. Sir, floor is yours.
Jan sir, thank you very much. And thank you very much, everybody who's listening to this webinar. Let me move to the screen share and I'll take you through a slideshow. There we are. Okay. Sorry. Okay, role of SMEs in revitalizing economic growth in Pakistan. That's the topic that was given to me to talk about, and I'm going to set the pace for this webinar. Some of the things you would already know, others I would share. Introducing myself, I started my business in 1977-78 with about 36,000 rupees that was given to me by my father. And he asked me to make sure that I paid all my taxes all my life. And in case I ever floundered and God did not give me enough, then I can do whatever I like. But I think God has been extremely kind, and we have, from a micro enterprise, we have risen to the level that where our company is now listed on the stock exchange. And this journey has been very, very fruitful for us. I'll talk about this journey also as we go along. Uh, okay, these are the current definitions of SMEs. Small is which has about 50 employees and about 150 million turnover. जिसका मतलब है कि 15 crore का turnover. And medium is about 250 people, up to 250 persons in a manufacturing and service industry, and about up to 100 people in trading, with a turnover about 800 million, which is about 3 crore rupiah. Now, what I did was I went to the banks and I asked them about how did they measure, or how did they target a large company. And what they told me was that a large company was a company which has a turnover of over 3 billion rupees, is stable, has a history, has a professional organization, pays its taxes, and so anything which is not large obviously should be medium. So just a second, how does this work? So if 3 billion is large, then obviously up to 3 billion would be medium. So this is a very big difference between what the government's definition is and what should be an actual definition. And a medium company would, if it has a turnover of around 3 billion rupees or less, it might have employees which are about 1,000. And this is a size of a company which is flexing itself to become large. It is being professionalized. Again, it has to be a tax-paying organization, because this type of organizations can't hide under the radar. So if we take this as medium, then obviously we have to define small. And to me, when I was working, I moved from this cash flow size of about 500 million, which is 50 crore, and I started hiring better people and better systems and better softwares and better computers and better machinery once I crossed 50 crore rupees of sale. So from 50 crores to 3 billion is the size of a medium company, and below it is the small size company is struggling. It is trying to keep its nose above the water. It's owner manager driven, and it's like a shop. And then you go to micro, where you have 1 to 10 employees and about 8 crore rupees ka turnover, and it's the beginning of entrepreneurship. um, and they are now working towards those 10 employees or 8 employees start working towards going up and up and become small as quickly as possible. Micro enterprises either stay there forever or they become small in the first 2 to 3 years. And then cottage industry is something, is a family income unit. You have no employees, your brother, sister, uncle, auntie, daughter, wife, everybody works in the house, and it's more of an income generation unit, which is called the cottage industry. अजल साहब ने अभी ये नंबर्स तो दिए हैं कि एसएमई कितनी है पाकिस्तान में और क्या कंट्रीब्यूशन है इसकी. अनफॉर्चुनेटली मेरे पास कोई कभी इसका डाटा कहीं से मिला नहीं है इस तरह का जो कि ऑथेंटिक डाटा हो. अगर सीएमआई है, सेंसस ऑफ मैन्युफैक्चरिंग इंडस्ट्रीज, तो वो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग के बारे में है, लेकिन तमाम एसएमईज के बारे में आई हैव नेवर सीन एनी सेंसस और एनी डाटा. एज्यूम डाटा है फेडरल गवर्नमेंट के पास कि ये जो ग्रोथ रेट वगैरह का उन्होंने एक फिक्स्ड ग्रोथ रेट उसकी ली हुई है और उसी पे चलते रहते हैं. बट दीज नंबर्स आर ऑल क्वेश्चनेबल. दे मे बी मोर देन 5 million SMEs in Pakistan, or there may be more people employed in this sector than the number we have. So I'm not very sure about these numbers. Again, the same thing about this. It just gives you an idea. There are more SMEs in Punjab than in Sindh, and there are more in Balochistan, no, KPK than in Balochistan. I've already talked about this. Let me move forward. Yeah. Engine of growth. SMEs are nurseries of entrepreneurship and innovation, absolutely essential for competitive and efficient markets. And it helps. These SMEs are actually working towards poverty reduction and equitable income. No government support or no government fund or Benazir income support fund can eliminate poverty. Only getting more and more small enterprises and micro enterprises and cottage enterprises will reduce poverty. And the focus has to be there, not on dishing out money which will be consumed, and the family will be poor next month also. Now, these are the important issues. Most of these small companies, let me talk about small companies because SME is, as I said, is a wrong term and should not be used. The small companies mostly start illegally. I started my company in the backyard of my house, which is against the laws, जो हमारे municipal laws हैं या LDA के जो laws हैं अब, they don't allow anybody to start a small manufacturing unit in the backyard of their house. So and then there are not enough commercial buildings out there, and most of the SMEs do not have the money to be able to pay the rent for those commercial buildings. So wherever they sit down and start working, somebody is going to come over to them and say that you are illegal. This is the reality of this country, that most of these small enterprises start illegally. Uh, in Lahore, for example, the industrial estate, we have two regular industrial estates. One is Kot Lakhpat, the other is Sundar. In Kot Lakhpat, we have 4,400 industrial plots. In Sundar, we have about 800 industrial plots. So a total of about 1,200 industrial plots. When I was the president of Lahore Chamber, we did a rough census of the industry in Lahore. The number was more than 60,000. So when you have space for only 1,200 and there are over 60,000 of them working all over the city on every road, Multan road पे चले जाएं, शेखपुरा road पे चले जाएं, गुजरांवाला के side पे चले जाएं, आप फिरोजपुर road पे चले जाएं, कहीं जाएं, you have industry and industry and industry, and it is all on land which was either residential, demarked residential, or it is demarked as agriculture, or everybody is hiding from the agencies जो उनको commercialize करने के लिए या एक पैसे लेते हैं. They don't give them services, they just take money and they commercialize them and make them legit. But I think that's not the way to do it. We have tried to make a map of Lahore of where the industry should be, and we needed something like 30 to 40,000 acres of land at that time. I think we need much more now, but I hope the present government is doing something about it. Financial windows are not for everyone. In spite of programs like Kamyab Jawan, life is a lottery for startups. जितने startups हैं, they get money either from friends, families, or fools. The banks normally don't lend to them, and it is extremely difficult for people to get money from formal sources because their own setup is fairly informal. So life is really a lottery for them. There are serious disincentives to productive enterprises. अगर आपने घर में स्कूल खोल लिया तो I don't know how many people will come to your house and ask you to close it down. And if you open an office over there and there are cars standing out there or motorcycles standing out there, somebody is going to come over and say कि आप illegal काम कर रहे हैं. So आप सड़क के ऊपर चारपाई डाल के सो जाएं तो आपको कोई कुछ नहीं कहेगा. आप वहाँ पे एक लेथ मशीन लगा लें so you'll get 15 inspectors coming to you asking you to stop doing whatever you are doing. There's an SRO regime in the government which provides raw material cheaper to large industries versus small enterprises. So there is a negative protection to SMEs or the small enterprises even in the government circles. Training and entrepreneurship development programs are not available. I think a lot of them are needed, and every bank who should be lending money, particularly in things like Kamyab Jawaan program, should make sure that people do get training of marketing their products and accounting and some other skills, and the an entrepreneurship, which is an attitude and a behavior rather than a skill. Industries departments and industry ministry, both in the provincial government and the federal government, has minimal bandwidth. They are more prone to managing prices in the market than really making policies for developing SMEs or industry. And then this word SME to me is like FPAC. Afghanistan and Pakistan are not should not be treated same. Similarly, small enterprises should be treated differently from the medium and large enterprises. Prevalence of informal learn as you go training, as the formal training is costly. So most of the people are learning by doing, and they make mistakes, and there's nobody to handhold them. So mentoring is also one of the weaknesses of our environment. We have a very large number of people who are retiring as bankers and government officers and economists and others. I think we should have a portal where all of these people are registered, and people should be able to reach out to them and get some support and help and get mentored. Um, Again, tax is one of the issues which keeps companies informal because of the very high frequency of tax payments. Just to give you a number, in India, you have to pay taxes something like 13 times in a year, and in Malaysia, 7 times in a year, and Singapore, 5 times in a year. In Pakistan, it used to be 47 times in a year, which I recalculated to 95 when I added the provincial sales taxes. And so it is really, people, and every time you deposit your tax or return, it becomes an auditable event. And so you have about 95 auditable events for anybody who goes into the formal sector just from the tax authorities. So compliance cost of tax laws is also very high. And then harassment and other words, I think we use these words quite frequently, and they are not really misplaced. So, just a few recommendations. Number one, improve targeting, change definitions, change the fundamentals of the economy. So once you change right, once you stop using the word SME and use small and medium, your targeting will improve, your definitions will improve, your direction will change, and your mindset will change. Our demographics and economic structures require us to have a fresh look at our legal and business ecosystems, including labor laws for small companies. And we need to create separate organizations. At one time, we used to have Punjab Small Industries Corporation. Similarly, we should have separate organizations for artisans, micro enterprises, cottage industries, small industries, and then separate platforms for medium and large industries, which are normally the employers association, and then we have the federation, and then we have the chambers and other everybody else. So these should be looking after medium and large enterprise industries, while the smaller segments of the economy need a lot of hand holding from the government. And the reorganization should be done under a planning and oversight body like an Economic Development Board of Singapore. Well, we don't see this over here. We have tons of government departments looking after the the different economic sectors, or things that are happening in the economic sector. We should have one. With that, I think I should thank you all for being patient and listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Almas. It was really a very practical kind of presentation. You said that there is no space for the startups. And then you said that you may lay down a चारपाई लगा दे तो कोई नहीं एतराज करता. तो अगर एक वो बेचारा अगर वो जूते को बना रहा है तो उसको उठा के भेज देंगे. Availability of capex and opex you talked about. And then finally, I think the most important point was that you have to change the fundamentals. Thank you, Mr. Almas. Very kind. And now I would request Mr. Zafar Masood, sir. Floor is yours, please.
जी शुक्रिया जन साहब. If I could get the access to the screen sharing.
जी.
how इसको लगाओ.
Sure, sure.
जी एक सेकंड. नहीं ये मैंने इसको थोड़ा आगे पीछे किया था. चलें, that's fine. We can work with this. That's okay. Jan sir, this is a very, very important topic, and I'm very glad that you have chosen this for a sort of a debate on what needs to be done, because this is about time. This is about time that we look at it in a different perspective. It's about time that we should start considering this particular segment as real business for everybody, for the government, for the regulator, and for the banks as well. So to begin with, next slide, if okay. So Almas Sahab has already covered that very well. I'm not going to reiterate what Almas Sahab has said. The criticality of SMEs is absolutely crucial for the country, for the future growth, and for the overall financial inclusion and bringing the country out of the poverty line. Next slide. So as the composition of SMEs from an access to funding perspective, between this and the other slide, there are around 1.2 million of them, as Almas Sahab also mentioned. They are relatively young, so that poses a kind of a challenge for the banks to have a successful track record of their performance. Majority of them are owned and managed by the owners themselves. So that also is a kind of a challenge to assess the skill set and to determine the systems and processes which exist there. The biggest challenge, and Jensen and I spoke to you earlier about this, the biggest challenge is that 99% are actually into micro and small space. And I'll talk about it in a bit, that the real challenge comes for the small piece. I think Almas Sahab also alluded to that, because micro is kind of taken care of well, although there are certain reforms required there also, through the micro financing framework, but small is something which is totally neglected. This is not something which is unusual across the region and other countries. If you look at the composition is the same. So the good part is that we can actually resort to those countries' success stories and then replicate the similar ones in Pakistan. This sector cuts across all the sectors, and that is kind of poses a uniqueness, and more so a kind of a complication for the banks to take care of it better. The reason is that the sizes are small and the cost of servicing them is very high. Therefore, there is less incentive for the banks to pursue this as a separate business altogether, and we have to make it worthwhile for the banks to consider this as real business. The complication is further sort of compounded with the pandemic. It's generally considered that SMEs are the worst hit, although the jury is still out whether what has been the impact of pandemic so far on the banking industry and the industry in general in Pakistan. But the general perception is that the pandemic has hit the small and medium enterprises worse than the others. It's actually become more of a sandwich between the micro, as I said earlier, and commercial banking. So the SME space is kind of shrunk and it's got stuck between microfinance and commercial banking. And the banks conventionally been a collateral-based lenders, although the trend is changing. But in Pakistan, the bank's mindset has been that they've been very collateral driven. And there's another reason for it as well. When you talk about high NPLs, which I talk about in a bit, the collateral becomes very handy in terms of provisioning. So therefore, for SMEs, the model of cash flow based lending doesn't exist, and hence very few SMEs qualify for funding. We're talking about almost 180,000 SMEs of 15% penetration as far as the bank financing is concerned. And interestingly enough, a very interesting statistics is that merely 40% out of those 180,000 are actually relationship driven, which Almas Saab also talked about, that this sector needs major hand-holding, and until unless you have that relationship model in place, the hand-holding piece cannot be taken care of well. Next slide. Okay, so various surveys has been conducted, and what has been the challenges they face in access to funding, SMEs face in access to funding. Two main themes have come out, which is high markup rate and associated charges, which is a very, very legitimate comment. I must say that that is a serious reason when it comes to financing to SMEs. And second one, again, a very practical one, is the collateral availability of collateral and the requisite documentation that the banks ask for. You see, we need to understand here, Jalsab, that the commercial banks are very documentation driven. In fact, we always, as bankers, say that bankers deal in documents, not in goods. And when we say that, we become very heavily tilted towards documentation requirements, and that's where the challenges for the SME becomes very serious. So, these were the two main things which came out. And in terms of financing requirements, what we've noticed is that the majority of them needs financing to reach to the next level of their the graduation to the next level for expansion, and which is also the sustainability, which is a requirement for their sustainability as well. Now, if we dissect it further, then mainly their expansion requirement comes through in the working capital space and also on the trade side. So relatively, trade side is better managed as far as the banks are concerned. They're more familiar how to manage the risk there. But when it comes to working capital per se, the complications are enormous because virtually a clean lending. And that's where the chicken and egg situation is, that for their further expansion to get to the next level, somebody have to take a leap of faith to support them, and then they graduate to a level where they will have better documentation, they will have more access to technology, they will have a better skill set, and then banks are much more easier to comfortable to lend to them. The most important aspect is that the largest sector of the economy is the service sector. So when we talk about the growth of SMEs and their financing requirement, it's easier to cater to the trade and working capital requirements, which is primarily trading and manufacturing driven, and the service sector remains, neglected for the above reasons that I mentioned, particularly the collateral and documentation. And that's why, if you could look at the graph here, despite the fact that, around 60% is service sector, 25% of the lending is to that sector in SME, which is something that, we need to find a solution to, because until and unless we take care of that, we will have challenges in SME financing. The result is that 66% of the SMEs prefer or they don't have a choice but to go for financing from sources other than banks. And the result is that again, high interest servicing, not very attractive terms, and impediments for them for their future growth and graduation. Next slide. Okay, that I've covered already. Next one. Okay, so what is the bank's views when they look at SMEs? The fact is that the banks don't consider it as a unique class of lending. And as I said earlier, that the most important thing is that it's, if they don't consider it as a unique class, it's very expensive to service them, given the diversity and the small size of businesses. So it's a very tricky situation for the banks, especially the commercial banks, to look at them as a separate class and then justify their profitability in servicing them appropriately the way they're supposed to be serviced. As I said earlier, again, lack of financial disclosure is a major impediment when it comes to the financing from banks. And the situation becomes more complicated when you talk about the foreclosure laws. Although the foreclosure law has been enacted, but is still not been tested. And when it was tried to be tested, the result has not been very encouraging so far. There has been weak technology offering because obviously SMEs can't have that kind of access to technology. Therefore, they always remain at a deficit when it comes to providing them the necessary, providing the banks necessary documentation and other documentary requirements. There's lack of R&D, of course. Well, that's the dilemma of the entire country, but SME more so. And most critical one is the skill set and the HR constraint. I think again, it's very interesting. It's a chicken and egg situation. आप एक level पे आएंगे तो तब आप ये सब चीजें कर सकते हैं, R&D, technology, better people. But आप जब तक वहाँ नहीं आएंगे तो somebody has to take a leap of faith to provide to get you to that level. जो सबसे important aspect है वो ये है कि the risk assessment जो banks करते हैं, they are not exclusive to the SME. And the framework is not in line with the commercial and the corporate banking. And they are determined. Their risk assessment is determined based on the same yardstick, which is very unfair because as I said, it's unique class, and it needs to be treated that way. The result is that there are high NPLs, 16%ish, and that keeps the bank sort of at the back foot to get aggressively into this business. In a nutshell, it's not a strategic business for the banks, as the banks consider it is more of a hassle and an effort and a half to get into this when you have government of Pakistan as dominant borrowers and give you a very attractive returns on a risk-free basis. Now, how to tackle with this? Next slide. So how to tackle with this? The fact is that everybody recognizes this as an important sector, and some steps have already been taken care of. Um, um, but obviously there is much more which is necessary. So prudential regulations have been exclusive prudential regulation introduced almost 4 or 5 years ago, but there is improvement warranted for sure, which I'll cover later. Recovery and foreclosure law has been introduced, but as I said, not been tested. Risk coverage and refinancing facilities have been introduced. Previous government did that. This government also introduced Kamyab Jawan and Punjab Rozgar schemes. But one thing is we need to understand that this is a process of evolution, and we need to improve the offerings under this based on the feedback from the industry, people like Almasa, and from the banks as well. To give the credit to the government in both these schemes, they have been very actively engaged with us, and we provided them the feedback and hence relatively better results than the previous ones. I think specific SME financing targets have already been allocated to the banks, but I don't think that is helping in any way. And I will suggest what is required to be done to further improve it. Next slide. So what is Bank of Punjab doing about it? Bank of Punjab for SME, although it's not a very proud moment, but Bank of Punjab should have been a much more active player in this right from the beginning. We have not been very active in this. And only last year, we've kind of created an exclusive SME department and a risk approval department to take care of this sector in a big way. Because we believe that this is one niche that will bring us into the top 5 banks in future, which is our plan in the next 5 years. The capitalization on the first loss schemes like Kamyab Jawan and Punjab Rozgar are very evident. We are #1 bank in Kamyab Jawan. We will cross 3 billion at the end of the month. The second biggest bank is 2 billion, which is National Bank, and the others are not even close. So by far, we are playing our role there and doing a very good job, although it could be improved further. But nevertheless, it's a starting point, and hopefully in the next 1 year, you'll see more improvement there. Punjab Rozgar, we are the only banks, again, working very closely with the government of Punjab to make sure that we will capitalize on this scheme for ramping up our SME portfolio. We are also talking to various multilaterals like Karandas and all to see how we can work with them in the SME space. Last slide. So, what needs to be done at the macro level? जिस तरह मैंने अभी पहले कहा, Bank of Punjab has done its bit, and various other banks, to be very honest, have done their bit as well. But there are certain structural changes which are necessary, and at the macro level, at the regulator level, and at the government level, certain actions are required to support this sector. Without them, the banks can do that much only. It has to be look into in holistic manner. We need to realize that this is one sector which is an engine of growth, and these are not the words. This is the reality. This is one sector that can bring the poverty levels up down. This is one sector that cuts across all segments, particularly agriculture that the government is talking about. So while we segregate it and mentioned it as a separate segment, but the support of SME in agriculture is also very substantial, and we should not, lose the eye on the ball on that one. The point is that there is a major mindset change which is necessary at the regulator, government, and at the banks level to pursue this sector. I must confess that the none of these constituents are doing enough for this sector. The support is inadequate. I can talk about Bank of Punjab. I'm not very happy about the way we are pursuing SME, and I think there is more which is required to be done. But then we would require more refinancing and credit guarantee programs like Kamyab Jawan and Punjab Rozgar, which sort of changed. By the way, on my part, I have already prepared another program, which will be a much broader program covering agriculture and S of the segment. The real challenge, as I said earlier, is in the S space, agriculture and S space. If we can take care of that through the credit guarantee scheme and refinancing, that will go a very long way in supporting that sector. We also need to, make sure that these refinancing schemes and guarantee schemes have specific targets for the banks. Abhi nahi hai. So, like like low-cost housing, there has to be a carrot and stick approach. That if you don't meet that target, then there will be a penalty, indirect penalty on you, which is not the case right now. There has to be specific target for each bank that they have to meet this number come what may. And then that number has to be monitored on a quarterly basis like it's done in the low-cost housing. There is an urgent requirement of having larger clean limits for this sector. The existing clean limits are not adequate at all. Almaz Saab also mentioned, I am a firm believer of this. There are specialized financial institutions required for agriculture, for SME, even for project financing. I think we need to revive that because, as I said earlier, commercial banks do not have the mindset and the skill set to cater to this particular segment. Better financial disclosure is something with the support is something which can be taken care of if we engage the multilaterals in this. So I had prepared a document, Charan Saab.
I hate to interrupt. थोड़ा जरा winding up की तरफ.
जी बस 2 points और हैं जी. I'm very sorry about this. I'm very passionate about this, so I've just got carried away. I'm very sorry. So this the financial disclosure wala and hand holding piece that Almaz Saab talked about in the skill set development wala, that piece can be taken care of if we start engaging the multilaterals. I think we are not engaging the multilaterals in the right way there. And I prepared a document whereby I already talked to DFID and we had convinced them that they will provide them the software and they will prepare their people for the next level this thing and the disclosure on how the documentation needs to be disclosed. That is something that needs to be done. And then legal structure revamp, we've talked about that. And last one is we need to have dedicated industrial states for supporting this business. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zafar Saab. That was a very comprehensive presentation. And you said that structural changes are needed and your recommendations are very comprehensive. You talked about entrepreneurship. Yes, SMEs would need finances, but they need direction, they need support, and they need encouragement. And what can the academia do about it? We always talk about the academia industrial linkage. We hear about the incubation centers coming up in various universities and under the government auspices also. So I have structured the whole show so that we move progressively. So we'll talk about the academia industrial linkage, and Dr. Zubair, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jan Saab. I hope I'm audible. Okay, thank you very much. And I'm really honored to be in this company here. I would like to talk about the role of the academia here, but the talks that I've heard just recently from Bank of Punjab official and another gentleman, they have a lot of things going on like in the financial institution or the public sector. But unfortunately, since I've been working in the public sector and the private sector, now in the academia, what I have observed here is that we tend to work in silos. We have our own independent islands, and we keep on doing that over and over and over and over again. The major thing that what I have seen here is the uh, lack of synergy. Many policies are being made, many initiatives have been taken, but the key stakeholders that are involved in it, they either lack interest or lack capacity, or they're simply not involved in it. Hence come the role of academia. Academia is the key player in this regard. We all know that we have a very high percentage of youth in Pakistan, around 35 to 40%, and we keep on talking about that. That's a great potential. And how to translate that potential into something that is really, really worthwhile is really the key question here. So all efforts, when I see the things from my perspective, should be geared towards that youth population. There's a huge challenge as well as an opportunity. In any SME sector's development, or you may include the micro also, the gentleman already was talking about it, that the micro sector should also be a part of it. As Indian government is doing it, they have included micro in SME. Human resource is the key element. So if we work on the human resource, and that is primarily coming from the academia, I'm not ignoring here the people who are not already in the education system, but if we have to nab them at all and bring them into the whole system, that will be a great achievement. So here comes in education sector, the role of the Bloom's taxonomy. We keep on talking about it. I hope you have heard about it. It has three key ingredients. One is the knowledge, other is the skill, and the third is the affection. Knowledge is about, we all know that, skills, what the skill they do learn. And thirdly, the effective environment or the socializing of that individual, because they're not going to work in an environment which is coming from Mars or from moons. They will be interacting with the people around us. This key element of skills is seriously lacking in Pakistani academia. And I do not per se belong to the academic sector. I've been teaching here, and now for the last 2-3 years, I'm working in academia. But the key ingredient that I found missing here, I've worked with Beria University and in Nammal, and also in some capacity with NUST also. But I have seen here the skill element is seriously, seriously lacking. They may have knowledge. We may talk about the depth of that knowledge or the scope of that knowledge, but the skill is that is seriously lacking. Unfortunately, the teachers or the academic managers are also not cognizant of this fact, that what skills are there being transferred to them. As far as the IT skills or the engineering skills are concerned, or engineering domains are concerned, I may say that they have some sort of understanding about the skills what they are gaining, but then the effective skills or the skills that they are required in the social environment, they are seriously lacking about. There has been a new undergrad policy, one good thing that has happened in the last 1 year in the Pakistani higher education sector, and that is the undergrad policy that was given by the ex-HEC chairman. Unfortunately, he has been removed. It's an excellent step in that direction, where they have not only catered to the knowledge, but also the skills, and they have followed the Bloom taxonomy. Many people have different perspectives on Bloom taxonomy, but these three key indicators always remain the same: the knowledge, the skills, and the effective environment. Now, we are again into the same cycle. That HEC policy is now being seriously debated, and many people loathe it. Why? Because they have to come out of their inertia. They have to work on their teaching dynamics. They have to develop their own systems as well as the curriculums and their implementation methodology in line with this new undergrad policy, and which they seriously either don't have capacity or they don't feel motivated to go about it. Hence, they are fighting tooth and nail against it. And since one of the key elements that contributed into the removal of the ex-chairman was this, that many people disagreed with the futuristic thinking or the thinking that he was talking about. Now we are again into the same cycle, and no HEC chairman is available at the moment, and we are working on an ad hoc capacity. This has a related problem. The related problem is this, that in the last 2 to 3 years, we have seriously gone into the favor of quantitative assessment when we are selecting the leadership for academia. Because of this whole humdrum about accountability, har koi chor hai, pakad lo, maar lo, idhar se le jao, udhar se le jao. Now everybody is concerned about it. Even the people who are there who have to select or elect. I'm sorry, I can't just integrate between the selector and elector because that's a political debate altogether. Some people call it selector, elected. But whosoever is selecting or electing that leader, they are under serious pressure. हमको कोई पकड़ ना ले, हमको कोई पूछ ना ले कि तुमने बंदा क्यों select किया. Now they have gone seriously towards in favor of the quantitative approaches. This quantitative approach that they have taken, particularly in academia, and the selection of the head of the institution has taken a serious dent as far as the understanding of the issues are concerned. The people might have published in some things in very high impact factor journals, but unfortunately, they do not have the understanding of the environment. They are largely the professors. And in Pakistan environment, they have the teaching environment. In my university, the two of the biggest myths that I've tried to break here is that A, we are a teaching university. And they said that we are here to teach only. Alhamdulillah, with the last 2 years or so, with my effort and my colleagues and my rector, we have been able to remove that barrier that we are a university. The teaching is one part only. But in most of the universities and the heads that are heading there, they do not have the exposure to the market, to the industry, to the environment what they are living in. Hence, they do not have any understanding of the enterprises, whether they are small or micro. I'm not talking about medium or large enterprises here. So when they are selected under that fear, and they are too under that fear, and this is a cycle that goes on. They do not want to take any steps. They do not want to take any financial decisions. They do not want to cater into the things that are required by the market, and hence the business incubation is the biggest sufferer. Now, coming to the business incubation, it has both pull and push factors, or you can say that the demand or the supply sides both are working there. If we say that we have certain ideas and we want to take it to the industry, industry is initially very, very forthcoming. कि आप हमारे पास आते नहीं, हमसे बात नहीं करते, हमारे पास बच्चों को लेकर आएं. But once you go to the chamber, then they say that, okay, they don't have any structured environment. In any academic institution, you might have some sort of semblance of structured environment, but over there, there's no structure as far as the Islamic chamber or the Pindi chamber or the federal chamber are concerned. They have certain kind of linkages, and if you want to have some structured feedback from them, they want to associate with certain problems with them, they want to have certain linkages with them, they're seriously lacking, and they work on individual basis. And again, unfortunately, the pull factor is from their side. Many of the industrialists who are working there, they perhaps lack that academic understanding. They might have got a wealth of knowledge or wealth of money, but they lack the understanding of the academic understanding that how the academia works and how these credit hour systems can be incorporated. So when these push and pull factors both interrelate and correlate with each other, somehow there is a missing link. And here comes the role of the government or the policy making. Unfortunately, as I've already pointed out, HEC is the biggest regulator of education in Pakistan and policymaker. They keep on going into the same circles again and again and again. And the linchpin or the benchmark in between these push and pull factors is again missing. Now we go back to square one. Coming into the business incubation center's real environment. We are running a business incubation center, and we call it BI Corner. It is one of the leading BICs in Pakistan under the HEC umbrella. But we are not, again, a perfect model here. When we have developed our own systems, what we thought about it, that the people who are working around us, above us, at tandem with us, or junior to us, they have the lacking of understanding. We took this case to an institution that is developed by the Higher Education Commission that is called NAHI, National Academy of Higher Education, which was brought up with a very great fanfare here and there. So we took the case with them and said that we need to educate the education managers with the different education institutions, barring some of the bigger institutions like NUST who have their knowledge park also. Most of the cases, they need training and the capacity development. When we took up this case with them, again, we came back with a very sorry figure that we may not be able to support this cause. And we have to give them some basic understanding of teaching. So while we have developed the curriculum for the business incubation and we shared with them, we worked with the Carnegie School and the British Council, and we have developed a very good curriculum with them. And this curriculum can be shared with other universities. We are ready and able to support them. But again, the push is there, but the pull factor is seriously. So I can see that I may be consuming a lot of time here. And in the concluding part, what I want to say is that please, whosoever is looking after the SME sector, please work for the key and the basic requirement of the human resource. We keep on churning out loads and loads of MPhils and PhDs and postdocs, and in some cases, bachelors also. But the skill side is seriously missing. Somebody who should have some hands with the HEC. We're also trying to rescue this undergrad policy. Please have this undergrad policy intact because it has a very good impact on the working of the skills and the effective environment. And I hope so this will go a long way if this undergrad policy remains there. Number two, the Kamyab Jawan program, we are the leading benefactors in Namal University of the Kamyab Jawan program, and we have conducted 2 cohorts with this. The Kamyab Jawan program is a very good effort, but there are certain lessons to be learned. We have developed certain lessons part, and we have given them to our counterparts. We have a closing ceremony on Friday on Kamyab Jawan program. This is only one initiative, not only the provincial government, but the district governments and the banks who are working at the lower level who should also contribute in this regard. Unfortunately, the Pakistani financial institutions are kind of complacent in this regard when easy money is coming from the very high interest rate from the government. 7% is still very high. They feel safe, they feel encouraged, they feel comfortable while giving money to the government or the government enterprises, and they keep on going with this. Housing sector was a difficult sector with the intervention of the Prime Minister himself. The housing sector is coming in, but next should be the SME sector, and the banking sector should come out of their complacency and start giving some money, maybe in the personal guarantees and maybe without any collaterals here and there. The third point here is, please hire the people for the higher positions in the academia, not purely on the quantitative case, itne marks isme liye hain, without having their qualitative approaches that how they are going to deal with the market environment, because the universities are not only teaching universities, they are the knowledge production, knowledge making, and knowledge coordination entities. And lastly, what I want to say here from the academic point of view, we need to invest a lot in the capacity development of the people who are running the business incubation centers, particularly in the academia. I thank you very much, sir. I hope I'm on time.
You are very well in time. Thank you very much for giving the academia. You said that the universities are not teaching universities. What I understand is you meant to say that they have to prepare their students for the life thereafter also. And it is so painful to see graduates, and there are people who have attained foreign education from Malaysia and from European universities. They have come back to Pakistan, they are jobless. And I'll also take this opportunity that the large enterprises and even the medium ones are firing people just because taking COVID-19 as the pretext of that we are losing money. There has to be some kind of regulatory mechanism that why are you firing your HR? Banks even. I'm sure Mr. Zafar Masood is listening. They are firing people, and banks are making good money, and then they are firing people that we have to, because there is COVID-19. So there has to be some regulatory mechanism because there is this is an explosion of joblessness. People are losing jobs. And this was my part. I just wanted to re-emphasize this point. And you said that knowledge is a wee bit of the whole thing, actually the skill development. Later when we come to Q&A session, you may like to dilate on this. You accused the financial institutions of being complacent. So we'll ask Mr. Zafar later. Dr.
I surrender, sir. I surrender. I agree with Dr. Saab. He's absolutely right. Right at the beginning कह दिया था कि we are inadequate. बिल्कुल सही कह रहे हैं डॉक्टर साहब. मैं इनसे 100% agree करता हूँ सर.
मैं सिर्फ ये सोच रहा था कि बैंक भी तो एक एंटरप्राइज है ना, उसने भी तो अपने प्रॉफिट शो करने हैं. इट इज नॉट अ philanthropic organization. So उसके लिए गवर्नमेंट, what is the state doing? So we come to Dr. Shujat. Please, sir. Floor is yours.
Thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this gathering of distinguished experts, all talking about the revival of SMEs in Pakistan. So, just briefly, I would like to mention that in the 50s and 60s, industrialization was both globally and also nationally was seen as the panacea to development. And Pakistan undertook in the 60s large-scale industrialization. But this industrialization, if you will recall, was to a very large degree state-led. Government institutions like PIDC, PICIC, Bankers Equity, and financial institutions, they were they were working together, and were in the business of setting these mega industrial units, steel mills, steel plants, cement plants, fertilizer plants, industries, large-scale industries that the private sector was shy of in investing. And in the 60s, we saw, good growth rates in the economy, driven largely to a large degree by industry, also by agriculture too. But by the end of the 60s, the lesson was that, despite this very spectacular growth, this good rate of growth, this was not really leading to in terms of addressing issues of job creation, joblessness, poverty, and it had bred a lot of inequality, even between the two provinces and also between various sectors in the society and economy. So that was, that experiment led to in the 70s to what we, led to the nationalization that we saw in the 70s. And then the 70s, nationalizations had their own problems. It discouraged the private sector from creating wealth in the country. A lot of people left the country, so that was not a good experiment. And there was in the 80s and the 90s, there was the country was largely, there was not much industrialization, and the country was largely handling the baggage of left behind by nationalization that we undertook in the 70s. And then in the 90s, we had a new paradigm. No more states, no longer in the business of setting up businesses, but largely in a policy and regulatory role, and the private sector in the driving seat in terms of the economy. So in this period, again, we did not have in the 90s no growth to write home about, barely surviving. And then the early part, in the first decade of the century, again, there was an attempt to reinvigorate the economy, and again a focus on the private sector through with a lot of donor support coming into the country. And we saw a period in the mid of the first decade of this century, the economy again showing up, giving us very good results, going up to growth rate of around 7%. And it was in this period that prior to this, there was no policy on industrialization, no real policy in the 80s, 90s, no policy, no sense of SMEs at all. The first policy, the first effort to give recognition to the SMEs in Pakistan, which was like in a large underbelly of the industrialization process that was going on in the country. The first recognition given to this large underbelly was the SME policy of 2007. And prior to that, SMIDA had been created in 1998 to give boost to the SMEs, and an SME bank was also set up in 2001 to, as a result of reorganization of certain pre-existing financial institutions together, putting them together, amalgamating them together, namely the Regional Development Finance Corporation and the Small Business Finance Corporation. So this was happening. The recognition of SMEs had begun to take shape in the first decade of this century. 2000, if you look at the 2007 policy, it is a brief document. It makes the right kind, it strikes the right notes about the dynamism and the vitality of the sector and its critical need for the economy, and what needs to be done as a government policy, what needs to be done, what are the measures that need to be taken to achieve the goals that were set out in the policy. Now, as it happens, 13 years down the road, that is the year that we stand in today, this policy, the policies was there, the institutions were there, the main SMIDA, the main entity that was to support and execute this policy was there, but 13 years down the road, there's not much to speak of in terms of tangible impact. The problems of the SME sector continue to be of the same scale, of the same degree as they were when the 2007 policy was crafted. And the diagnosis was correct, the measures were there, but the implementation was quite lacking, as seen in the results, that there's very little tangible impact on the ground. Now, once again, there's a realization in the government that SMEs are an area which have been grossly neglected over the years, and this is now critical for giving a broad-based in the country. Broad-based in the sense that, it is not just a large sector, broad-based in the sense that we need a kind of growth, a quality of growth that serves not only the already well-to-do sectors, but that growth trickles down to the bottom as well. So the SME policy is an effort to give energy to that underbelly so that it gives you broad-based growth. Now, a lot of this policy is yet to be, there's a document. It has reached the highest levels of government, but for some reason, it is still not getting the final nod or the final approval from the relevant forums so that action can start happening on this policy. In the meanwhile, there are piecemeal elements that are coming out, in the form of an action plan. This is what I've heard about in some of the newspaper reports. But the policy still has to, in terms of that big bang that it needs to create, that still has to happen. Now, this policy is different from the 2000 policy in the sense that it recognizes the changes that have taken place since the 18th constitutional amendment, the different roles of the provinces in terms of taxation and other areas of public sector regulatory endeavors. And then it also takes into account the speed of change in the world, the need for innovation, technological pace of technological change, the need for, and also a recognition of the globalization that has taken place. And the fact that, we as a country have not really fully integrated into that process. Well, all around us, countries through their focus on competitiveness and through efforts to integrate with the global value chains, they had raised their exports 10, 15 times from where they started. Whereas we, in our case, our export share fell because of the lack of implementation on these policy goals that had been set out, but there was no follow through as needed. Now, what needs to be done? Now, in terms of all these things have been identified, they were there in 2007. They're also in that draft document 2020 to 2009. And the core issues, there are 4 areas that are of great worry to the SMEs and where government action needs to happen. One is in the field of taxation. Taxation is it's a very complicated process in Pakistan, and it is particularly very challenging for SMEs because they do not have the capacity to fulfill the legal document capability, to fulfill the legal requirements and the documentation requirements. So most of them prefer to stay under the radar. They don't want to be seen as visible entities, and they want to keep away from the tax net. And that is something that is hurting the ability of the government to help the SME sector. For this to happen, for them to become more formalized and more recognized entities so they can access the various facilities that are being available from various entities in the economy, they need to formalize, and for that, this tax structure needs to be simplified. In Pakistan, it has been reported that the entities here have to pay have to deal with 34 taxes, where in regional countries, in the neighboring countries like India, Bangladesh, the number of taxes is somewhere approximately around 10. So this is an area where the government really needs to get its act together and simplify the tax structure so that it helps the process of formalization of the SMEs, and through that, that will also give us more productivity as well as more revenue. That is the need of the hour for the economy. The other area, and the main things that need to happen here is, again, the provinces. There are provincial taxation authorities as well, the provincial revenue authorities, and there's a national federal board of revenue, and these entities have to deal with both these organizations. That leads to difficulties in terms of filing returns. So there's clearly a need for a unification of these taxation measures into a single unified taxation authority. That is a proposal in the policy, but is something that needs more traction at the policy level. Then there is the other issue that again relates to government and is an impediment to SME growth is the regulatory burden. The burden of regulations that Almas Saab talked about, the labor inspector, the excise inspector, the boiler inspector, and certain other agencies, the social security people, all these people, these multiple agencies, because of the regulatory roles and authority that they are given, they make life very, very difficult for the SMEs, and they do not allow them to reach scale, to carry on the activities more productively than now, and that is a great deterrent to growth of the sector. Now, here, what the government, one initiative that I would like to talk about is something which is happening in the Ministry of Commerce, an initiative by the title of Pakistan Regulatory Modernization Initiative. And what this basically asks for is some kind of a stock taking and review of all regulations that have accumulated over the years during various political governments during various different policy paradigms which kept on shifting. And these rules have kept on accumulating without any effort at any level to keep track whether they are redundant, whether they have outlived their usefulness, whether they need to be on our statute books at all. And while, as long as they are on the statute books, they continue to give authority to these various predatory representatives of the state to keep harassing the SMEs. So in this sense, there's a new concept is being introduced into the government called the regulatory guillotine. What the regulatory guillotine is, that all these regulations need to be subjected to scrutiny. 4 questions needs to be asked: are they legal? Are they necessary? And are they business friendly? If they do not fulfill the first 2 tests, then they need to be eliminated. And if they fulfill the first 2 tests, that is, they're necessary, they're legal, and they're not business friendly, then they need to be amended or revised to make them more business friendly. So this is something that is happening in the government sector. Access to finance is an issue, has been talked about at great length by Zafar Masood Saab. Banks, again, as he rightly said, banks need to tailor special products. They need to design special products for SME sector, which needs to be handled by kid gloves. It needs special consideration. It is not like the bigger blue-collar, blue-chip companies who can very easily lobby and get around the barriers that hamper the SMEs. And so this is something that again the professor talked about. This needs to be addressed by the federal government. And in this regard, there is an SME finance policy which allows for the things like cash flow financing and non-collateral financing, because SMEs do not have. Sometimes they are on lease, sometimes they are on rent, so they don't have ownership documents. So these modes are there, but these modes are not being there. These modes have been allowed by the State Bank of Pakistan, but the banks are reluctant to put these modes into operation. As again mentioned by Zafar Masood Saab, because the banks don't want to take the risks that are associated with lending to SMEs, and they're much more comfortable doing business with the government. Again, that is a big challenge. And so this is an area which the federal government has to play a more proactive role in getting the banks to be more proactively engaging with the SMEs. And then finally, I would just, because again, in terms of time, I think some of these things Hakan would talk about. SMEDA, the role of SMEDA. Private sector was given, as I said, 90s, and the first 2 decades of the current century have largely been the role, have largely seen the private sector in the driving seat. But issues that should have been handled in some way, the private sector, issues that are not handled by the private sector, like credit, provision of credit to small firms, small enterprises, issues of this nature, which there's a demand, and that demand is not being fulfilled by the private sector, are in the economics literature are called market failures. So there are many market failures. There's a market failure in the credit market. There's a market failure in the skills market. The private sector is not delivering is not taking the kind of interest in developing a skills market, although they need these skills, the skilled manpower. But somehow that initiative from them is not coming. So this is a sort of a market failure. And when you have market failures, you have then you have a clear role for the government. You have a rationale for government interventions. And it is very, for me, it's very encouraging that now this, once again, the government is being called upon by the private sector, recognizing their own limitations, that please come in and help us, obviously through partnerships, help us in terms of meeting these needs, the needs that are not only will help the SMEs, but will help the overall economy.
Okay.
So it is in this sense that SMIDA has a role. SMIDA has a role as a lead government agency in terms of developing, designing measures that would address some of these market failures that I've identified in the credit market, in the skills market, also in the technology market, and also in terms of delivering the right kind of infrastructure that is needed for the SME, small and medium enterprises. So I think keeping the time factor in mind, I think this is all I have to say.
Thank you. We'll have Q&A session also. Actually, I have been reading Dr. Hakan Najib also. He had a very good exposition on SMEs in one of his write-ups. So I was waiting for what you have to say about because we requested you to form a model and what is ultimately is to be done. But before I come to you, Dr. Hakan, I would like to comment on what Dr. Sujat said. You talked about the 18th Amendment. And in my very humble opinion, its review is much needed, and it's not a political problem. It's a matter of governance and national security, including economic viability. So this 18th Amendment has to be reviewed for umpteen number of reasons. You talked about waiting for the Big Bang, and you talked about regulatory modernization, and about the governments. The governments they function through bureaucracy, and we have former bureaucrats sitting here. In my opinion, I think those involved in, for example, for SMEs and for economic growth and all, bureaucracy should have KPIs. Don't we have targets in corporate sector that you have to achieve? This is the sales target, this is the marketing target, this is the production target. Where are the KPIs for the bureaucracy? Sir, what have you achieved? This is your target, and that's what you have to do. This is one small point which I wanted to put forth. We can discuss it later. So, Dr. Hakan Najib, floor is yours, sir.
Thank you and Assalamu alaikum. Jan Sahab, I think जैसे पाकिस्तान इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ को बेहतर करने की तरफ मूव करेगा, SMEs का उसमें एक कलीदी रोल होगा. So it's a very topical thing to do. देखें, landscape everyone has set up very well. Let me just in 1 minute reiterate it. 5.2 million economic establishments हैं मुल्क में, 99% उसमें से SMEs हैं जो इस वक्त इस broad definition में fall कर रही हैं. 1,80,000 borrower हैं सिर्फ. 7% of the total financing जो है वो SMEs को जाती है. 2019 फरवरी में सरकार की तरफ से मैंने एक ट्वीट किया, वो कुछ यूं था, 500 बिलियन का जो एस्टिमेट है वो क्रॉस कर गई है SME फाइनेंसिंग. 2020 दिसंबर में, यानी कि कुछ 18 माह बाद जब दोबारा मैंने उसको देखा तो वो कम होके 480 अरब रह गया था. इसके अलावा अगर आप ये देखें कि ये जो SMEs हैं ये तकरीबन 40% आपके GDP को कंट्रीब्यूट करती हैं, 25% एक्सपोर्ट्स को कंट्रीब्यूट करती हैं डायरेक्टली और इनडायरेक्टली. इस एटमॉस्फेयर में अब आपने करना क्या है? I think that is the question that we try and answer always. लेकिन सबसे पहले तो ये बात है कि कोई भी पॉलिसी बनाने के लिए, चाहे वो 2007 की पॉलिसी थी या 2020 की पॉलिसी है जो कि ऑन द टेबल है, अभी अप्रूव नहीं हुई, आपको सबसे पहले एक अच्छी डेटाबेस चाहिए. पाकिस्तान का लास्ट इकोनॉमिक एस्टैब्लिशमेंट्स का जो सेंसस हुआ वो 2005 में हुआ. आई वुड स्टार्ट विद एन इकोनॉमिक सेंसस of the establishments that exist in Pakistan, number one. मैं थोड़ा पॉलिसी लेवल पे अब पॉलिसीज में गुम होने की बजाय बिलीव करता हूं कि यू हैव टू बी क्वालिटेटिवली एंड क्वांटिटेटिवली वेरी क्लियर एज टू वेयर यू वांट टू मूव, और अगर आप एक सफे पे उसको एक्सप्लेन ना कर सकें तो देन यू गेट लॉस्ट। और अगर मैं 2007 की पॉलिसी इंप्लीमेंटेशन देखूं तो नो वन वेदर इन द गवर्नमेंट और इन द प्राइवेट सेक्टर कैन क्लैरिफाई टू मी कि उसकी क्या हुई पॉलिसी इंप्लीमेंटेशन। सो हमने इकोनॉमिक सेंसस से शुरू किया। एसएमई डेफिनेशन का एग्रीमेंट नहीं है, मीनिंग स्टेट बैंक एक यूज करता है, एसईसीपी की एक दी गई है, उसको एक पेज पे ले आए कि स्मॉल एंड मीडियम एंटरप्राइजेस को आप कैसे डिफाइन करते हैं, और उसमें स्मॉल और मीडियम को अलहदा कर दीजिए ताकि जो भी टारगेटेड सपोर्ट आनी है, और जब मैं सपोर्ट कहता हूं तो इसका मेरा मतलब कतई तौर पे सब्सिडीज नहीं है, जो भी सपोर्ट आनी है इन टर्म्स ऑफ पॉलिसी इनिशिएटिव्स टू हेल्प देम, और वो अभी हम उस पर फर्दर बात भी करेंगे, उसमें बड़ी क्लैरिटी हो। इसके बाद आप एक इकोसिस्टम डिफाइन करें कि एक स्टार्टअप इकोसिस्टम क्या होगा पाकिस्तान में, फाइनेंसिंग का, लॉज का, यानी कि आप बिजनेस एनवायरनमेंट की एक सफा डिफाइन करें कि एक सफे पे आज आप बता दें कि आप क्या रिडक्शन करेंगे इंपोर्ट टैरिफ्स में, आप एसएमईज का जो कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स है जो कि इस वक्त 25% के करीब है उसको किस तरह कम करेंगे ताकि मेरे लिए एज एन इकोनॉमिक एजेंट एक इंसेंटिव क्रिएट हो। कौन से बॉन्डेड वेयर हाउसेज हैं वो कहाँ पे बनेंगे, ये इतना मुश्किल काम नहीं है, इसको भी आप डिफाइन कर दें। फिर आप ये डिफाइन करें कि ये जो रेगुलेटरी जिलोटीन है जिसका बहुत अच्छा जिक्र किया डॉक्टर साहब ने, इससे आखिर होगा क्या, कितने लॉज चले जाएंगे, कितने लॉज रिवैम्प हो जाएंगे, और कितने नए लॉज की जरूरत होगी। और आखिर में 3 सतह पर, डिस्ट्रिक्ट की सतह पर, प्रोविंसेस की सतह पर और फेडरल की सतह पर एक पोर्टल होना चाहिए जो आप और मैं जाके देख सकें कि अगर मैं फूड बिजनेस करना चाहता हूं, बिकॉज ज्यादा एसएमईज रिटेल और इस तरह के बिजनेसेस में 53%, तो वो क्या लॉज हैं जो मुझे अप्लाई करेंगे। Sometimes even having been in the government for more than a decade and still continuing to help them, I even can't define if I have to set up a business. So एक simple portal बना दें. Let's make life very simple. As they say कि इसका मंत्रा क्या होना चाहिए? As they say, if you love someone, set them free. We have come to a stage where we have to start believing that 230 million people of Pakistan can contribute in the tarakki of Pakistan. If you believe in that, then set them free. So इनको जितना set free करेंगे आप, clutches of, इसको आप कुछ कह लें, rules कह लें, regulations कह लें, red tapeism is not the is an inappropriate term. सो आप ये डिफाइन कर दें, एटलीस्ट एक पोर्टल पे हम इनको डिफाइन कर दें। सो एक बिजनेस एनवायरनमेंट आपने क्रिएट कर दी है। सिंप्लीफाइड टैक्सेशन बड़ा सिंपल है, एक पेज का आप फॉर्म बनाएं, वो प्री पॉपुलेटेड फॉर्म हो, यानी कि उसमें भरा हो कि आपको क्या टैक्स अप्लाई होगा। अगर वो ठीक है तो वेरी वेल डन, अगर वो नहीं ठीक है तो मैं उसको ठीक करके भेज दूंगा। अगर ये आप कर पाएंगे तो फिर आप उनको नेक्स्ट स्टेज पे लेके जाएंगे, विच इज के सप्लाई कंस्ट्रेंट्स क्या है इनके, यानी कि फॉर देम टू बी एबल टू सप्लाई, व्हाट आर द सप्लाई कंस्ट्रेंट्स। सो वी आर इन द थर्ड पिलर, वी डिफाइंड एसएमई डेफिनेशन एज द फर्स्ट पिलर, बिजनेस एनवायरनमेंट एज द सेकंड पिलर, सप्लाई कंस्ट्रेंट एज द थर्ड पिलर। वो क्या है? एक क्रेडिट गारंटी स्कीम पिछले कई सालों से हम बनाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, यानी कि कोई क्रेडिट गारंटी कर सके ताकि एसएमईज की फाइनेंसिंग, जैसे कि सही कहा दोनों एकेडेमिया से भी, डॉक्टर साहब ने और जफर ऑब्वियसली हैज बीन इन दिस बिजनेस फॉर अ लॉन्ग टाइम, ताकि हम उसको हेल्प कर सकें। एसएमई की जो फाइनेंसिंग पॉलिसी है ये एक एनएफआईएस है, नेशनल फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन पॉलिसी, उसको डिफाइन कर दें फॉर ऑल पीपल, फॉर ऑल बैंक्स, फॉर ऑल एरियाज, कि जी क्या होगी अगले 3 साल में। I have read that policy because I was part of that policy. But बहुत से लोगों को पता ही नहीं है कि कितना क्रेडिट अगले 3 या 5 साल में जाना है। When I say बहुत से लोग, I mean people in general, people like Almas Heather, and he is one of the very educated and highly sophisticated investor. But I'm talking about the ordinary people. फिर आप एक डेटाबेस बनाएं कि बिजनेस डेवलपमेंट सर्विसेज का, इसका क्या मतलब है? This is what hand holding is today. Hand holding is not giving a subsidy at all. I mean, I firmly believe in that. हैंड होल्डिंग टुडे इज कि अकाउंटेंट्स, इंजीनियर्स, ऑडिटर्स का एक डेटाबेस बना हो। अगर एक एसएमई है वो उस डेटाबेस में जाए, उस डेटाबेस से वो पिकअप करे कि ये एडवाइजर्स हैं, मुझे इस चीज में हेल्प कर सकते हैं, ये मुझे स्टार्टअप इकोसिस्टम में हेल्प कर सकते हैं, ये मुझे टैक्स में हेल्प कर सकते हैं, सो दैट दे डोंट गेट लॉस्ट। अगेन वेरी सिंपल, दिस इज द डिजिटाइजेशन एट वर्क, दैट डेटाबेस शुड बी वेरी क्लियर। इंक्यूबेटर्स की बात हो गई। आई थिंक इंक्यूबेटर्स जो हैं वो मतलब आपको एक टारगेट अगेन कर लेना चाहिए कि अगले 3 साल में हम इतने इंक्यूबेटर्स क्रिएट करेंगे, जैसे जन साहब ने राइटली कहा, या आप टीईवीटी को ये टारगेट दे दें, आप यूनिवर्सिटीज को ये टारगेट दे दें कि आपने इतने इंक्यूबेटर्स क्रिएट करने हैं और वो अगेन क्रिएट होने चाहिए। अब आप ये करना चाहते हैं कि स्पेस एलोकेशन, बहुत अच्छी बात की है। देखिए स्पेस एलोकेशन जो इतनी बड़ी एसईजीज बन रही हैं, 9 है, बेशतर खाली पड़ी हैं, बेशतर वर्क नहीं कर रही, इसमें 25% जो कोटा है वो सिंपली आप एसईजीज में डेडिकेट कर दें टू स्मॉल एंड मीडियम एंटरप्राइजेस। और अगेन नॉट ऑन अ बाइंग बेसिस, दीज शुड बी ऑन अ पेइंग बेसिस, कि वो अगले 25 साल में इसको रेंट बेसिस पे खरीद सकें, ताकि ये इवेंचुअलिटी ऐसी हो कि उनको बोझ ना पड़े इनिशियली। लैंड इज एज एक्सपेंसिव इन लाहौर एज इट इज इन एम्स्टरडम और पेरिस, यू नो, आई डोंट नो हाउ मेनी एसएमईज कैन बाय। सो आपको ये कोटा भी बना देना चाहिए। सो दिस इज कॉल्ड टारगेटेड सपोर्ट, not in terms of subsidy, but in terms of bringing them on ground. So ये आपकी supply constraint है। अब बात आई है कि आप ये चाहते हैं कि अगर आपका टैक्स टू जीडीपी रेशियो तो बढ़े, पर आप ये भी चाहते हैं कि वियतनाम का जो एक्सपोर्ट टू जीडीपी है वो 100% है। 74 अरब डॉलर की एक्सपोर्ट करती हैं उनकी जीवीसीज, यानी कि जो ग्लोबल वैल्यू चेन का पार्ट है, जो स्मॉल एंटरप्राइजेस हैं, 74 अरब डॉलर की जस्ट टू सैमसंग। हम यहाँ जब 24 से 25 अरब डॉलर की टोटल पाकिस्तान की एक्सपोर्ट होती है तो हम कहते हैं ओहो, आई डोंट नो व्हाट वी हैव डन। ऑन अ स्केल वी आर डूइंग नॉट मच। एज आई सेड, 500 अरब क्रेडिट था एसएमईज को, जब मैंने ट्वीट किया 2019 फरवरी में, वो आज कम होकर 480 अरब है। सो अब इसमें मार्केट एक्सेस में क्या कहना है? टीडीएपी का एक रोल है, टीडीएपी को कंप्लीटली रिवैम्प करने की जरूरत है। अगेन जब मैं रिवैम्प कहता हूं तो मेरे नजर में ये नहीं है कि मैंने कोई सारे बंदे ढूंढने हैं। ऑल यू नीड इज गुड स्मार्ट सीईओज एंड देन लेट देम टेक द ऑर्गेनाइजेशन। एज आई ऑलवेज से कि सीईओ का सबसे बड़ा काम यह है कि वो एक टीम बनाए एंड देन ही टेक्स इट। लोकल एग्जीबिशंस एंड फेयर्स एंड एम्पोरियम्स में इनको अगेन एक डेडिकेटेड स्पेस, यानी कि 30% आप इनको फराहम कर दें। एक्सपोर्ट्स की आप मैचिंग ग्रांट्स दे सकते हैं, दैट इज द ओनली सब्सिडी आई ऑलवेज रिकमेंड, कि आप मैच कर सकते हैं उनको, कि अगर आपकी इतनी एक्सपोर्ट बढ़ सकती है तो हम उसमें आपको एक मैचिंग ग्रांट दे सकते हैं। मतलब अगर आप लार्ज स्केल मैन्युफैक्चरिंग के बड़े एक्सपोर्टर्स को बिजली 7.5 सेंट की और गैस 6.5 डॉलर्स पर BTU की दे सकते हैं, तो आप इनको भी ये चीज दे सकते हैं। आपको ट्रेडिंग हाउसेस सेटअप करने चाहिए। अगेन प्राइवेट सेक्टर को आपको इंसेंटिवाइज करना चाहिए कि वो ट्रेडिंग हाउस सेटअप कर सके, बिकॉज आपकी कनेक्टिविटी चाहिए है विद द वर्ल्ड। अनटिल अनलेस दे बिकम पार्ट ऑफ सम ग्लोबल वैल्यू चेन, आई मीन आप कोई भी बड़ी आइटम अगर पकड़ लेंगे एक दफा, चाहे आप डेल मोंटे पकड़ लें, चाहे आप क्राफ्ट पकड़ लें, चाहे आप कोई सेमीकंडक्टर पकड़ लें, जब तक आप इनको कनेक्ट नहीं करेंगे, बिकॉज खुद ये कनेक्ट होने की सलाहियत या काबिलियत नहीं रखते। और मैं ये वर्ड सलाहियत बड़ी हम्बली यूज कर रहा हूँ। ऑब्वियसली कई चीजों की सलाहियत मुझे नहीं थी जब मैं बाहर नहीं पढ़ता था। जब मैं बाहर फंड मैनेजर से बात करता हूँ तो मेरी एक डिफरेंट सलाहियत क्रिएट हो गई है। सो यू नो, फिर आपको इनको इंसेंटिवाइज करना है। यू नो, एक बड़ी क्लियर प्रपोजल आप ये कर दें कि जो आप इस वक्त, आपके पास पब्लिक सेक्टर डेवलपमेंट प्रोग्राम है पाकिस्तान का, मतलब पूरे पाकिस्तान में 1000 अरब खर्च होगा इस साल सारी आउटले का, उसका 8 से 10% जो है आप डेडिकेट कर देंगे, दैट इज टुवर्ड्स द एसएमईज। अगर आप ये डेडिकेट कर देंगे तो दैट पार्ट विल गो टू देम। सो आप सोचेंगे उनके लिए कितना बिजनेस क्रिएट होगा। सो मार्केट एक्सेस के जो कंस्ट्रेंट्स हैं उनको हम ईज कर रहे हैं। अब ये आप सब कहेंगे कि यार ये बातें तो सारी अच्छी हैं, बट एक तो यह कि मैं पॉलिसी का बिलीवर हूं एट द बैक एंड, मैं बिलीवर हूं इस चीज का कि मैं एक पेज पे, आई हैव अ डॉक्यूमेंट इन फ्रंट ऑफ मी व्हिच आई ऑलवेज ओपन व्हेन आई टॉक अबाउट एसएमईज, सामने रख सकता हूं, जिसके अंदर ये सारी चीजें जो हैं वो डिफाइन हो गई। ये बड़े डूएबल्स हैं, आप छोटे और डूएबल्स भी कर सकते हैं। बट बात यह है कि इतना टाइम मैंने सरकार में गुजारा, आई थिंक 11 बजट्स किए, और अभी वाले बजट को भी देख रहा हूं। आप रिप्रेजेंटेशन देखें ऑन द टेबल विद द लीडरशिप किसकी होती है? सब बड़ों की होती है। जो इसको रिप्रेजेंट करते हैं कि 99% वाले, यू नो, जस्ट रिमेंबर कि मुझे फैन वालों से मुलाकात हुई थी बिकॉज वो गुजरांवाला से थे एंड दे हैड अ बिट ऑफ क्लाउड, दे डोंट इवन हैव एक्सेस। तो पहले तो आपने कोई रोल ये क्रिएट करना है कि आपने इनको एक्सेस देनी है टू द पावर कॉरिडोर्स, ताकि हमारे जैसे लोग कम से कम समझ तो सकें कि इसमें क्या हो रहा है। मैंने एसएमईज को जितना समझा है, दैट इज एक्चुअली आफ्टर आई लेफ्ट गवर्नमेंट। I mean, you know, I'm trying to be honest with you. मैं बहुत टेक्सटाइल को समझता था, मैं बहुत पावर सेक्टर को समझता था, बट मैं एसएमईज को बहुत कम समझता था, मैं उनके यूनिवर्स को कम समझता था। सो आपको इनको एक्सेस देनी है। एक्सेस के लिए इनकी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस को अगेन आप 30% ऑफ द टाइम बजट में डिवोट करते हैं कि जी ये एक्सेस जो है सिर्फ इनको मिलेगा, नॉट टू द बिग बॉयज, नॉट टू द ओवरसीज चेंबर्स, बट टू द बॉयज हु विल क्रिएट योर एम्प्लॉयमेंट। अब आपको एक इसके साथ साथ आई थिंक एसएमई डेवलपमेंट फंड बनाना चाहिए। ये मैं बहुत अरसे से कह रहा हूं कि यू नो यू नीड टू हैव फंड्स इन पाकिस्तान। मतलब वेल्थ फंड नहीं बनाना चाहिए, हम सरप्लस कंट्री नहीं है बजट के, पर एसएमई फंड बनाना चाहिए। जैसे आपने टैरिफ एक्रेडिटेशन फंड बनाया हुआ है, उसमें पैसे कोई नहीं देता, बट आपको एक एसएमई फंड क्रिएट करना चाहिए। अ पर्सन लाइक जफर मसूद साहब शुड यू नो लीड दैट फंड, और पर्सन ऑफ इंटरनेशनल कैलिबर, और वो फंड ये काम करे कि यू नो आई हैव ऑलवेज सेड कि 30 अरब देयर इज एन एस्टिमेशन गोइंग अराउंड कि आप इस फंड को लेके चलें, ताकि आप पनपने के लिए इस फंड से यूज कर सकें इस पैसे को। अब आपको एक इकोनॉमिक एक्सपर्ट्स एडवाइजरी सर्विस बनानी चाहिए, वो पूल ऑफ पीपल जो कि मैंने पहले भी कहा है, दिस इज द डेटाबेस। सो यू नो ये कोई भी काम ये आपने जाना है, आप उनके पास जाएं, यू फाइंड योर ऑडिटर, यू फाइंड योर एडवाइजर। These are the बेंटोस। देखिए दुनिया में सबको समझा जाता है कि जी जो एंटरप्रेन्योर्स थे, वो चाहे फंड मैनेजमेंट में हो, चाहे वो ईवी यानी कि टेस्ला में हो, हर कोई इलॉन मस्क का नाम जानता है। आप कितने पाकिस्तानी एंटरप्रेन्योर्स को जानते हैं जो कि ग्रो किए हैं और आप कहेंगे यू नो दे हैव डन अ वेरी गुड जॉब? नॉट मेनी, बिकॉज जॉब सिक्योरिटी एंड सरकार की नौकरी को समझा जाता है। So a culture creation through these seminars and through talking to people. I mean, we should be talking, the great people are the people who will build the jobs in this country, who will build that chip which will fall in one of the iPhones or the Samsungs or the Xiaomi's of the world. Those are the people who will take our meager exports of $24 billion, 8% of GDP, when Bangladesh is at 14%. So you know have to start changing the culture. बहुत सेमिनार्स करें, हर जगह करें, हुकूमत करे, प्राइवेट सेक्टर करे, आप जैसे लीडर्स करें कि एक एंटरप्रेन्योरियल कल्चर तो क्रिएट करें कि देयर इज समथिंग कॉल्ड एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप। मतलब एमबीए में एक कोर्स लेने से बात बनेगी नहीं, एंड ऑफ कोर्स यूनिवर्सिटीज का एक बहुत बड़ा रोल होगा, बट यू नो आवर कल्चर हैज टू शिफ्ट। मतलब किसी एसी को तो रिश्ता बहुत आसानी से देगा कोई, बट एक एंटरप्रेन्योर को जिसको ये दिखाई दे रहा हो कि अभी मेरे पास सिर्फ 36,000 हैं, अलमास हैदर साहब जैसे, और मैं सिर्फ काम करता हूं अपने बैकयार्ड में, you know our culture again doesn't support, but today he's mashallah one of the leading entrepreneurs in Pakistan. इसके अलावा अब आ जाएं आप स्मीडा की तरफ। देखें ये जो हैंड होल्डिंग, गेटिंग द होल पिक्चर, स्मीडा बहुत अच्छी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन थी। मैं बिलाल साहब को मिला जब ये पहली दफा ऑर्गेनाइजेशन बनी, एंड ही वांटेड मी टू कम ऑन इन स्मीडा एंड वर्क विद हिम। आई कुडंट, आई वाज गोइंग अब्रॉड, सो मैं नहीं आ सका उनके साथ। आज स्मीडा का बजट अगर मैं आपको बताऊं तो आप हैरान हो जाएंगे। You know, these are underfunded organizations. 26 करोड़ का बजट है उसका। आप चाहते हैं कि 99% इकोनॉमिक एस्टैब्लिशमेंट्स हैं पाकिस्तान की जिनको सख्त हैंड होल्डिंग की जरूरत है, वो उसकी 26 करोड़ में चारों प्रोविंसेस, गिलगित बल्तिस्तान, गुजरांवाला, सियालकोट, ट्रायंगल ऑफ एरियाज, इसमें सब में जाके आप हैंड होल्डिंग कर दें और आपको प्रेजेंट करें ऐसी चीज, इज नॉट हैपनिंग। यू नो यू नीड टू बिल्ड दैट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन अप। उसकी अपनी भी प्रॉब्लम्स होंगी जरूर, जैसे हर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की होती है, बट यू मेक इट अ फोकल पॉइंट। उसका लेवल भी बढ़ाना पड़ेगा। आई मीन अगर आप बीओआई को डायरेक्ट अंडर द प्राइम मिनिस्टर रखते हैं तो उसका लेवल भी आपको बढ़ाना पड़ेगा। इंडस्ट्रीज इटसेल्फ इज अ डिवीजन जो शायद फाइनेंस या पावर की तरह नहीं है। जब आप सरकार में रहे हो तो आप you know ये चीजें समझ जाते हैं। and then you have SMEDA somewhere based in Lahore, which is unable to. Yes, SMEDA की revamping जो है वो जरूरी है। starting you know इसकी revamping इसी तरह हो सकती है, starting from a board down to the level of the management. but again 26 करोड़ रुपया, मतलब बड़े अरसे से मैं देख रहा हूँ कि उसका बजट जो है वो अराउंड 25-26 करोड़ ही चल रहा है। मिडिल लो पेड एम्प्लॉइज 2.5-3 लाख के ब्रैकेट के Where will you find these people? So you need to revamp them, you need to incentivize them. अब इस सारे से हम चाहते क्या हैं? देखिए, हम चाहते हैं कि जो आपके लीडिंग सेक्टर्स हैं ना, जिसमें आईसीटी एंड एलाइड सर्विसेज है, जिसमें पाकिस्तान को बिल्ड करने की जरूरत है, जिसमें आपका फिशरीज सेक्टर है. वाई फिशरीज इज अ लार्ज पोटेंशियल फॉर एक्सपोर्ट इन पाकिस्तान. अगेन, ये मैं उनकी बात कर रहा हूँ जो बहुत अंडर वैल्यूड है. लाइट इंजीनियरिंग, आई मीन आप 3-4 बड़े सेक्टर्स उठा लें, ये तो है जो मैं देखता हूं आपके एक्सपोर्ट साइड पे. अब आपने पाकिस्तान का कहते हैं जी इन्फ्लेशन बहुत हो गई, इन्फ्लेशन का हल भी यही है. आप कहेंगे ये क्या बात की मैंने? logistics will solve your inflation problem in Pakistan. चौधरी साहब के गांव से, कराची के जमींदार के गांव से, शुजात भाई के गांव से जब प्रोड्यूस ने आना है और मार्केट होना है, यू नीड लॉजिस्टिक्स सपोर्ट, स्टेट ऑफ द आर्ट. लॉजिस्टिक्स बनाने के लिए सबसे बड़ा आपको एक एसएमई सेक्टर जो है वो हेल्प कर सकता है. सो अगेन, इन द लोकल एरिया इस पे आप करें. कंस्ट्रक्शन का ऑफ टेक है. अगेन, नंबर्स don't tell a great story, but at least there is an off take. So we leave it there. Tourism का बहुत potential है. Again, this whole retail business is with the SMEs, so that will grow domestically. और आखिर में my favorite, which is precision agriculture. मतलब दुनिया में कई revolutions हुए agriculture के. हमने green revolution से बहुत फायदा उठाया. उसके बाद जो revolution हुआ, जो 90 की दिहाई में हुआ, I don't think we took part in it. अब हम एक प्रिसिजन एग्रीकल्चर से गुजर रहे हैं. हम जब कहते हैं कि जी मौसम की वजह से फसल खराब हो गई, सो इफ यू मूव टू प्रिसिजन एग्रीकल्चर, अगेन एसएमईज डोमेस्टिकली कैन प्ले अ लॉट ऑफ रोल. सो हमने डोमेस्टिक एरियाज भी आइडेंटिफाई कर दिए, हमने इंटरनेशनल एरियाज भी आइडेंटिफाई कर दिए, हमने वो 5 चीजें भी आइडेंटिफाई कर दी जो करने की जरूरत है. नाउ दिस इज द होलिस्टिक फ्रेमवर्क. ये एक इंटीग्रेटेड फ्रेमवर्क है जो मैंने आपके सामने रखने की कोशिश की है. इस इंटीग्रेटेड फ्रेमवर्क को एसएमई के ग्रोथ आर्किटेक्चर में तब्दील करें और इसको आगे लेके चलें. कलीदी रोल ऑफ कोर्स कहीं तो देखिए ना, ऑपरेशनल तो होना है इस चीज में. मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ इंडस्ट्रीज ने इसको ऑपरेशनलाइज करना है, मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ इंडस्ट्रीज ने ही इसकी आवाज बनना है. बट प्राइवेट सेक्टर के लीडर्स, आप जैसे लीडर्स जो कि ये काम कर रहे हैं एडवोकेसी का, अगर इस सारे फ्रेमवर्क को समझेंगे और एक पेज पे आ जाएंगे तो आगे लेके जरूर चल पाएंगे. 1 साल से एसएमई पॉलिसी इधर उधर जा रही है फॉर अप्रूव हो जाएगी, बट अगेन लेट्स नॉट गेट लॉस्ट इन दैट. फ्रेमवर्क जो है हमें उसको तब्दील करना है. 168 पेज की पॉलिसी जो है शायद मैं भी नहीं पढ़ूंगा, बट एक सिंपल फ्रेमवर्क, डूएबल्स, अचीवेबल्स इन द नेक्स्ट 3 years जो मैंने कुछ आपके सामने रखे. सो दैट्स द काइंड ऑफ अप्रोच आई थिंक वी नीड टू टेक फॉरवर्ड.
Thank you, Dr. Khan. Thank you very much. Giving a very comprehensive, you dilated on, basically you started with the recommendations. We know the ailment, we know where things go wrong, and you have given the remedy. A few things, I'll just taking cue from what you said. You talked about incentivizing SMEs. This is very important. I just received a question, or rather a comment for somebody. He says that we are hounded by police, social security, local bouncers, mafia, electricity company. This culture of pakad lo, phad lo must end. So when you are talking about hand holding, basically you make the entrepreneurs feel secure. Give him that sense of security. And I think there has to be a social awareness. And then you talked about space allocation. Yes, one is looking for space, and you can't find it in industrial zones, industrial estates. So therefore, they have to go to B-class housing societies. And then they are in various bungalows and where villas, these small industries come up. You gave example of Vietnam. We could have achieved that level of exports also. We had huge potential, but then we faced political instability, total political instability. Yes, there was skill development, but there was no political support, and all the elements of national development, they hinge on political stability. There's another comment coming which said that for this stability and all leading political parties need a think tank, need think tanks to work, to research and work on their policies. Because whenever there's a change of the government, they totally dismantled whatever had been done before. A word about corruption. Yes, we are a corrupt society. But then for eradication of corruption, there has to be a comprehensive strategy based on social awareness. It is perhaps permeated into our DNA. And we can't say that we are not a corrupt society. Corruption is there. But when we start hounding everyone, then the things stand still when the country is in ICU. So these are the thoughts which I had, what you said. Sir, we'll thank you very much for your whatever you have put before the audience and everyone. There are a few questions. Actually, when the questions were trickling in, most of these have been answered. So just for taking the discussion forward, there's a question that why do you club small and medium together? So this has been adequately answered. Sir, anybody would like to dilate further on it? That there is a small, medium, and then micro. Any further comments, sir? Anybody? Okay, I think that is covered already. The question from somebody from Dubai: what lessons can Pakistan learn from the microfinancial model of Grameen Bank? Dr. Yunus's model supported the small enterprises and brought millions of people from above poverty lines. Sir, anybody would like to comment on this? Like to answer? Yes, Dr. Shujat.
Sir, the Grameen model, sir, basically is a community-based model, and while it was the environment was conducive for its uptake in Bangladesh, the community models in Pakistan have only worked in the northern areas, and that is Gilgit and Baltistan, and nowhere else. That is because of the nature of a social organization is such that community-based lending cannot succeed unless you have, egalitarian communities. So that is one reason it has not taken off with Pakistan. Ukhuwat is something which is like, a much smaller scale, something which comes closest to that model. If I can think of anything in Pakistan, you have the microfinance banks, but as Zafar Masood Saab said, I don't think they are making any real headway in terms of, the kind of penetrate to the level at which Grameen was able to go. Ukhuwat is something that probably to some degree is going in that direction in Pakistan. So I think we can't really learn much from that model.
Okay.
एक तो ये अंडरस्टैंडिंग मेरे नहीं ख्याल कि करेक्ट है कि ग्रामीण has been making an impact on the SME front. I don't think so at all. Secondly, एक और चीज जो मैं क्लैरिफाई करना चाह रहा हूँ वो ये कि हमारा रेगुलेटरी रेजिम जो है उसके अंदर there are constraints on the microfinance on what the maximum loan amount they could do. For example, they can't do more than 500,000 rupees. So therefore, they are not in that space at all. That's why I emphasized, and I think, as always, Hakan Najib was very articulate, very rightly pointed out. I think Dr. Shujat also talked about it. We need specialized institutions in that space. And Samida is one institution that needs to be revived, managed properly. SME Bank is another one. I have had many arguments, General Saab, on this particular aspect of specialized institutions. And, Hakan as well as Shujat Saab, who have been exposed to these, template institutions like myself, and I include World Bank and IMF there, they have this mindset that, because in the past, these institutions did not deliver, we should not get into that. And there are many policy makers in the government who believe in that as well. My only argument to them is don't throw the baby with the bathwater. Look at the problems that they were out there for PIC, for NDFC, for anybody else, and fix them. We have the a clear-cut example of fixing the banking sector. Look at Habib Bank, look at UBL, even National Bank now. Look at that. Look at Bank of Punjab. Look at where we were 15 years ago and where we are today. So we have those examples. It's just a matter of putting the thing, mind to it, and then making sure that we deliver.
Okay.
Jalal Sahab, so just building on Zafar Bhai's point. So what is a multilateral? A multilateral is a development institution. तो आप हमें पाकिस्तान में किस तरह ये कह सकते हैं कि हम development institutions ना बनाएं? Absolutely, I agree with him. अगर Industrial Development Bank ने अच्छा perform नहीं किया, that doesn't mean you don't need development institutions in Pakistan. You very much need development institutions in Pakistan. जो हमारे बड़े बैंक हैं, they are not geared towards this kind of financing, so you need specialized institutions. I agree with him.
Okay, got it. There's a question. Is progressive farming part of SME? Because ultimately agriculture sector comes to our rescue as in the current financial year. Mr. Almas, would you be able to answer this?
Certainly. SME, as defined earlier, is just a matter of size. कि अगर इतने लोग होंगे तो हम उसको small कहेंगे, और इतनी अगर turnover होगा तो उसको हम medium कहेंगे, और इतना होगा तो large कहेंगे. So that's just a division, a notional division with a lot of gray areas between one definition and the other. जहाँ तक एग्रीकल्चर की टेक्नोलॉजीज का ताल्लुक है, या मैन्युफैक्चरिंग की टेक्नोलॉजीज का ताल्लुक है, या सर्विस इंडस्ट्री की टेक्नोलॉजीज का ताल्लुक है, they have nothing to do with being small, medium or large. It has everything to do with the type of business that they are in, or what customer they are servicing, and how well they are producing, and what is the technology acquisition level that they have. So it has nothing to do with the small, medium and large basically. So इसीलिए मैं अब अगर आप मुझे देखेंगे तो मैं SME का लफ्ज़ भी नहीं इस्तेमाल इसलिए नहीं करता हूँ, because I don't believe in this word कि SME जो है वो एक लफ्ज़ है. Small is very different from medium, and medium is very different from large. So let's now focus as a group or as a country on these different segments, and then make them grow so that micro becomes small, small becomes medium, and medium becomes large.
Sir, I just want to make a point. Progressive agriculture, when you say SME enterprises, you basically mean some kind of a legal entity. अब legal entities के भी कई तरीके हैं. ये sole progressive farming का मुझे नहीं अंदाजा कि वो कैसे legal entity बनेगा. Progressive farming is just progressive farming. It will not be really an enterprise. कोई या तो उसको sole proprietor. Agriculture sector में तो ऐसी legal entities का रवाज नहीं है. So I do not know how, अगर वो उसको SMEs कहेंगे तो वो कैसे benefit कर सकेगा policy से, unless it's a legal entity. I think that's a question that needs to be answered.
Agriculture is again something which is very important and very close to my heart. Again, let's look at certain facts about agriculture. Agriculture, 65%, and this is an old study by the way, so the number would have increased by now. 65% of the farmers are less than 5 acres, and around 90% are less than 10 acres of land. Now, when you talk about this size of business, you can't talk about SMEs there. You can talk about microfinance there, and we are working on that. We've devised a whole plan around it. Or at best, जिस तरह अलमास साहब फरमा रहे थे, जो मेरा भी आपसे पहले बात हुई थी कि ये at best S में आ सकता है, या वो नीचे आएगा प्रोग्रेसिव फार्मिंग पर से लीगलाइज स्ट्रक्चर के अंदर डालना, जैसे शुजात साहब फरमा रहे हैं, I don't think that is the solution to the problem given our agriculture landscape and dynamics.
Okay, the fact remains that agriculture has to be supported, and there was a dedicated bank, Zarait Rakiyati Bank. I don't know how good is that doing, and then the other banks do not have the feet on ground in the rural areas. So therefore, how can you support the agriculture sector?
जी मैं आपसे गुजारिश करता हूँ, देखिए एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर को सपोर्ट करने के लिए जो सबसे प्रॉमिसिंग टूल आपके पास अवेलेबल है, that is your microfinance businesses. And when you talk about microfinance, I would like to divide microfinance in two parts. We generally, get confused when we talk about microfinance. There is microfinance banks and then microfinance institutions like a Huvat. I'm not talking about microfinance banks. Microfinance banks have the similar problems as the commercial banks have. And if you look at more deeper into it, then microfinance bank licenses are generally used for using the technology-based solutions, not for the real trickle-down effect on the people. So microfinance institution framework needs to be looked at, revived, and मैं तो इसका बहुत बड़ा supporter हूँ कि microfinance institutions जो हैं उनकी भी जो पूरी regulatory regime है उसको या तो आप SACP के अंदर ज़्यादा robust बनाएं, like the way we are doing it for the banks, या आप इसको shift करें to the State Bank of Pakistan जहां पर वो बेहतर तरीके से trickle down effect आ सके. Microfinance institutions are such a great tool available for agriculture and for example low cost housing. Okay, that I think something that we don't have a view on.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. We'll come now to the conclusion, and a minute or so for everyone to give a parting comment. We'll start with Mr. Almas. Please, sir, your parting comment.
Thank you very much, sir. It was very, very interesting. Unfortunately, I couldn't stay throughout the program, but I kept listening to some of the clips that were and the pearls that were being dished out. If I have to say one single thing for the government of Pakistan, and that would be to redefine SME into its components, and then start creating institutions. That we created Punjab Small Industries Corporation probably in the 60s or early 50s or late 50s. We don't have an institution. We don't have an institution today for micro enterprise, for example. Punjab Small Industries Corporation is actually looking after micro enterprises. And when we say Samida, and then Samida is really not doing much, although it has a very big mandate. But rather than making a few hundred feasibilities and then trying to engage with different groups of people and trying to help them, you don't see their impact anywhere. So once we start redefining this sector, we can start retargeting these sectors also. And once you start retargeting them, then I think everything will start coming into place.
Oh, thank you. Dr. Zubair, your very brief parting comment.
Well, thank you very much. It has been very enlightening, and I think that some listening ears should be around, not only the students, but also some of the policymakers at the higher echelon. But I propose here that please make the academia as the pivot or the central part or the linchpin of this whole activity that may revolve around small, micro, or the medium enterprises. Here you can move around, look around, get the human resource and how skillful they are, and then business incubations can play a vital role. One parting thought about the agriculture sector, perhaps we are missing that we have agriculture universities and pretty large agriculture universities in all parts of our country, in Karachi, Lahore, in Rawalpindi, in Faisalabad. Why can't we have those agriculture scientists or the agriculture graduates working into the progressive farming areas, developing into some modern farming techniques? We still have largely those redundant tools being used, and they are not being run on corporate lines as they should be as the small or the micro or the medium enterprises. So I think academia should go ahead, and also there is the pull factor in all aspects of life. We have all types of academia and the universities in this country, and should be working around them to create some kind of synergy.
Thank you, Dr. Najib. Your parting comment, please.
I think if I was to move around, I would start with a word called connectivity. I think connectivity is the future of the world, and connectivity of the SMEs with local experts, with mentors, with the ability to learn new techniques, and connectivity to sell internationally, connectivity to become part of some global value chain where they can find some kind of a thing that they can sell internationally. Connectivity in terms of learning internationally what's going on, yet having their local focus. And secondly, as I keep saying, we have to promote that an entrepreneur is as good as a guy who's in a job and may actually do very well, like people like Almas Saab who started in their backyard.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Shujat, sir.
Sir, I had used this concept of a market failure. There were many, the public sector had great success stories to its credit in the past, globally and also in Pakistan. But then the public sector went faded into the background, and that is why it's being pilloried left, right, and center. Now, if I have to key, and then now increasingly we are seeing all the documents that I read, market failures, things that need to happen but are not happening because the market cannot provide them. Credit, skills, मैंने दो बातें की. In India के अंदर, there is a dedicated ministry of small MSMEs. So if you want to take, अगर हमने SMEs को really एक big push देनी है, तो I think ये अलमास साहब ने सही कहा था, ये इन्होंने कहा कि ये जो ministries और जो महकमे हैं, ये कीमतें, they're in the business of setting prices, they're not doing what they need to be doing. तो हमें अगर SMEs पे कोई अच्छा काम करना है, तो I think we need a dedicated organization at the highest level of the government. It could be a division, it could be a separate ministry, और वो ये काम करेगा तो कुछ होगा. अदरवाइज जो मैंने आपको बताया 2007 की पॉलिसी भी बनेगी, और ये जो 26 करोड़ की बात की, आई हैव वर्कड इन द मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ फाइनेंस, मैंने मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ इंडस्ट्रीज की सारी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस को मैंने हैंडल किया हुआ है. इसके पास देयर इज अ प्लेथोरा ऑफ इंस्टीट्यूशंस इन द मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ इंडस्ट्रीज. 40-50 इनकी छोटी छोटी हजारों कंपनियां हैं. जब ये बजट लेने आते हैं, किसी का बजट 2 करोड़ है, किसी का है, ये सारा का सारा बजट मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ इंडस्ट्रीज का तनख्वाहों में चला जाता है. Most of it goes into salaries, and very little happens in terms of ideas and innovation and way forward. ये चीजें नहीं हो रही. ये मेरे पार्टी कमेंट्स हैं कि ये अगर हमने वाकई इस पे काम करना है, तो एक हमें बड़ी विल चाहिए, strong with and also an organization to implement that will. उसके बगैर ये नहीं होगा.
Shujat, आपका जो parting comment है ना, it has taken the thunder out of my concluding remarks. Because ये will चाहिए, कुछ करने की जुस्तजू चाहिए. मैंने आखिर में डॉक्टर जफर साहब, मैंने आखिर में आपके लिए मौका दिया था पार्टिंग कमेंट. मैं सोच रहा था, यू आर लाइक पाकिस्तान, यू आर अ सर्वाइवर. पाकिस्तान में भी था कि ये जी भी ये हो गया तो पता नहीं पाकिस्तान का क्या बनेगा. So you are also a survivor like Pakistan. So we would like to have your comments, parting comments.
जी शुक्रिया सर. आपने क्योंकि उसको कनेक्ट किया, तो मैं जरा उसी के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में जरा आपको इसका सलूशन भी बता दूं. वो आपने और शुजात साहब ने कवर भी कर लिया. जब सर मैं अपने रिकवरी बेड पे था हॉस्पिटल में, तो मैंने कहा यार ये अल्लाह ताला ने मुझे दूसरी जिंदगी तो दे दी है, मगर ये तो अल्लाह ताला ने दी है ना, मेरा तो इसमें कोई एफर्ट नहीं है. मैं तो फेंट कर गया था जब जहाज क्रैश कर रहा था. एंड मैं जो होश उस पर आया, व्हेन आई वाज survived, I was rescued already. तो अब मुझे क्या करना है to make sure कि ये वाकई अल्लाह ताला ने जो worthwhile मेरे लिए की है चीज, मैं उस पे काम करूं. And I think the most important thing was to work aggressively and with the right pace without any fears. So जो आप जो आप विल की बात आप और शुजात साहब कर रहे हैं सर, दैट इज द बॉटम लाइन. अगर आज गवर्नमेंट की विल हो जाए, और मैं उसी से अपना अपना पार्टिंग कमेंट भी कनेक्ट करूंगा कि अगर गवर्नमेंट की विल आज हो जाए कि उनको एसएमई के बिजनेस को रिवाइव करना है, तो ट्रस्ट मी दिस कुड बी रिवाइव्ड वेरी क्विकली. टेम्पलेट्स आर आउट देयर, इंस्टीट्यूशनल सपोर्ट्स आर आउट देयर. हमने अभी देखा है कि जब गवर्नमेंट का फोकस हो जाता है हाउसिंग के ऊपर या लो कॉस्ट हाउसिंग पे, तो एकदम से जो है वो सारे बैंक्स भी गैदर हो जाते हैं, सारे सोल्यूशन भी निकालने लगते हैं. सारी इट्स अ so by the way, housing was a much complex an issue than SME was. And if we look at SME, it's a secular issue to my mind, which needed some government intervention and slight focus at the government level and the regulatory level. And trust me, this could be resolved. Banks are complacent. मैं डॉक्टर जुबैर से 101% agree करता हूँ. Banks are not motivated to do this business because आज GOP is the dominant borrower, बड़े अच्छे रिटर्न्स आ रहे हैं हमें. मगर जब रेगुलेटरी हम पे कसदर लगाएगा कि आपने ये नहीं करना और आपको पेनल्टी लगेगा, तो आप देखिएगा हम किस तरह भागते हैं. Unfortunately, this is the way our society is. This is the way our bankers are, and I think this is what is the crux of the whole thing.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for your participation, and thank you all the people who have joined us online and have been watching this. Telling you personally, when we structured this webinar, I was discussing with Dr. Shujat, and I had proposed that how to revitalize the industrial sector. And when we discussed on advice of Dr. Shujat, I said, let's focus on SMEs. And now when I carried out my little research and we have dilated here and listened to you, it is a realization for me, and I am really educated on this, that how important SMEs is. And as Zafar Saab said, you just focus on SMEs. और इसके लिए राहबरी चाहिए थोड़ी ऊपर से, रेगुलेटरी और गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से अगर ये एक डायरेक्शन मिल जाए, सपोर्ट मिल जाए और एक पॉलिटिकल सपोर्ट मिल जाए, तो ये हमारा तो मुल्क जो है ये एसएमई तरक्की करके पाकिस्तान को कहां से कहां ले जा सकता है. मैं एक दफा फिर आई एम वेरी ग्रेटफुल टू ऑल ऑफ यू.
Before you close, can I make a small एक छोटा सा comment?
Please sir.
Why do we have to look at the government to do everything? जिस तरह से आपने ये एक फोरम बनाया हुआ है, why can't the private sector get together and make a forum, and अगर आपने इसको लीड करना है, आप इसको लीड करें and make sure कि इतना ज़्यादा ड्रम आउट हो. जिस तरह हमने ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस को, what we did was कि हम रोज़ाना एक अखबार में खबर दे देते थे ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस के ऊपर 2015 में. उससे पहले कोई इसका जिक्र भी नहीं था करता. इस तरह से एक अगर प्राइवेट सेक्टर प्लेटफॉर्म इसको आइडिया को कैप्चर कर ले और रोज़ाना एक खबर देनी शुरू कर दे, तो देखिए ये 60 खबरों के बाद प्राइम मिनिस्टर भी इसके बारे में बात कर रहे होंगे.
सर बिल्कुल, मैं ये हमारा इकबाल इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ पॉलिसी स्टडीज का मैं एक बात कहूँ कि इसके बाद जब भी हम वेबिनार करते हैं, हम इसकी एक रिपोर्ट बनाते हैं जो कि आपसे कभी कभी हम पार्टिसिपेंट से भी शेयर कर लेते हैं. एंड बिकॉज ऑफ माय पर्सनल एफर्ट इट इज शेयर्ड एट द हाईएस्ट लेवल और पॉलिसी डिसीजन मेकिंग पे. एक्सक्यूज मी. बट आई टेक द क्यू दैट हमें इसमें अवेयरनेस और क्रिएट करने की जरूरत है. And I'll get back to you on this. We will inshallah take the lead on this. इन्हीं अल्फाज के साथ सर अपना ख्याल रखिएगा. Thank you very much for being with us. Pakistan जिंदाबाद. खुदा हाफिज.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
शुक्रिया.